Good morning, everyone. I won't take a lot of time because I know that our next speakers are going to be very interesting, and I think there will be an interest in questions after. But I would be remiss if I didn't welcome all of you to the heart of our beautiful 5th District in Monterey County, the district that I am fortunate to represent. I have Monterey, Carmel, Pacific Grove, Pebble Beach, Carmel Valley, Big Sur, all the way down to San Luis Obispo County, and Highway 68 towards Salinas through the wine corridor. So as you can understand, I'm a rather proud person to be able to represent this district full of a lot of terrific people. Many of the people are people that you don't think about. Because when you come to our county, you think about the beautiful fields and the lush golf courses and the beautiful crashing waves. But there are a whole lot of people that are important to our community to be able to ensure that we have grass cut, that we have good food that's put on our table, that we have the benefits of the people who work so hard to pick and to prepare and to really put their hands on the food that we're fortunate to eat. The same for the people who work in hospitality. Our two biggest drivers and economic drivers are hospitality and agribusiness. Those are two businesses that employ a lot of lower income working people. So the issue of housing, the issue of affordable housing, the issue of homelessness is one that's really very important right here in this beautiful part of Monterey County. So thank you for being here today. And I'm really pleased to be able to moderate this segment. Today we have two very interesting speakers. We have James Hamill, who is the Managing Director of the California Statewide Communities Development Authority. We also have speaking with us as well is Debbie Latham, who is the Chief Deputy County Counsel for Sonoma County. We are really fortunate. James from the CSCDA is going to speak to funding and financing tools that are available to counties as they work to develop affordable homes for households at all income levels. Debbie from Sonoma County Counsel has been involved in litigation related to the homelessness crisis and local government obligations to provide shelter to the unhoused. So you can see these two people are going to bring a lot to our table. James now oversees all of the public financing programs for the Statewide Communities Development Authority. During the last 15 years, his efforts have resulted in the deployment of more than $20 billion, that's with a B, dollars in financing for more than 450 projects throughout California that have provided significant public benefit. With a background in bankruptcy law and having spent 2 years as a law clerk with the United States Bankruptcy Court, James is highly skilled at providing creative solutions and proactively managing bond programs. So we're very pleased to have James, who will speak for a bit, and then after we'll have a little bit of time for some questions, and then we'll have Debbie with the same process. So thank you all for being here, and I'm looking forward to the next speakers.
Thank you, Mary, and good morning, almost afternoon. James Hamill again with CSCDA. As Mary mentioned, you may or may not know who we are. We were created by CSAC and the League of California Cities 31 years ago in 1988 to be a partner with you as counties and the cities across the state to issue bonds on a statewide basis. Affordable housing is one of the areas historically and up to today that we focus on. We've done over 900 projects throughout the state, all the way from the Mexican border to the Oregon border, for about $8 billion in affordable housing and over 60,000 units. So we've seen it in urban, we've seen it in rural, we've seen it in semi-urban, we've seen it all over the state, and really work to partner with you as counties and the cities that we partner with to create and preserve affordable housing throughout the state. What I'm here to talk about today at a very high level is making a suggestion that we change the conversation a little bit about affordable housing. And the one word I want to remind all of us is, as I go through this, is opportunity. When you look at affordable housing across the state, a lot of people say low-income housing, affordable housing, underserved housing. Those connotations and the stigma associated with that is something that people within communities look down upon. They see a negative connotation of it. They think of it as the projects, as where the riffraff lives. It's not where the riffraff lives. It's where teachers live. It's where your police officers live. It's where your sheriffs live. It's where your firefighters live. So what I say to everyone we talk to is this is opportunity housing. You are giving the opportunity to these people to feel safe, to get an education, a good education within your community, to have fresh food locally, to have jobs within a driving distance that is reasonable. Opportunity. Simple, to the point. And it changes the discussion whenever this is brought up within your county. Because this is not low income. This is creating opportunities for your constituents. So how did we get here? In California, we have over 2.2 million plus people who are low income. Out of that 2.2 million, there's only around 700,000 low-income units that are available. So you have a little over 1.5 million people searching for homes that can't afford it and that is not available. So that creates a dynamic that we've been discussing today from the very beginning. And how do we get out of that? And how do we move forward? It's going to be multifaceted. There's not one solution. We can't look to the state alone. We can't look to the federal government alone. We can't look to counties alone. We can't look to cities alone. And we can't look to the private sector alone. This is something that is going to be a broad range effort and create, again, that opportunity for your constituents to flourish within your communities. All these things, fresh food, education, healthcare, they make a strong community. And without a strong community, there is no community. So that's the key to bringing this opportunity as a whole. From a high level, what we like to do whenever we talk to cities and counties on a whole is we use an acronym called LIFT. And what that stands for is the solutions that are out there on a broad basis for cities and counties when it comes to affordable housing. And the acronym LIFT is L for local resources, I for institutional resources, F for federal/state resources, and T for transportation. And I'll go a little bit into each one of those and how they apply. It's very basic. Every single one of these has to go into detail when you get to the real nuts and bolts of it, but it gives a good platform in order to bring back to your county and talk to them about and get the discussion started. Local revenues or local resources. You've heard about some of these from the last panel, inclusionary zoning, affordable housing, impact fees, those types of things, and creating opportunities for unique type of housing within your community. That comes from the local. And the reason we start with the L and the I is because these are things that you as counties can control more than what's going on at the federal level and more than what's going on at the state level. So we like to put those up front because you can control those more than any other thing going out there. And you can't really control transportation because it's there. So those are some of the keys and the focus points that you have to look at is how are we addressing these things locally? Do we have enough land here? Where is the land? How is the zoning for our affordable housing? And taking that step and looking at that. How do we raise the revenues? Do we charge impact fees? Do we require residential developers to pay a fee or have a certain set aside? And we've seen that in many cities and counties across the state doing that. So local. Institutional, and you've heard a lot about this today, is really partnering within your community, partnering with your local cities, partnering with your nonprofits, partnering with your colleges if you have them, or universities within your city or county. We've seen this, some examples across the country. One is in Duke, where Duke University and the city of Durham entered into a partnership in 1996 and has raised over $12 million for affordable housing within the community through a neighborhood partnership. That's one example. University of Chicago has done the same thing. They went around, and there's an example that was raised in a question, and bought up 2,000 homes around their university where 65% of their staff is able to live close to work and not have to commute ridiculous amounts of time to work. So it's that different type of thinking that has allowed those partnerships to evolve here. Federal and state revenues, F, or resources. Those are things, as we all know, we can't really control. At the federal level, we're seeing HUD and all the programs being diminished, being cut back, and all the lobbying in the world, all the resources may not change that. We still need to push on it. We still need to ask for it. It's still something to look at, but it's something that is out there and is a resource. Then at the state level, there's the bills, everything we know about from resourcing standpoint. Those add to the column of funding resources that are available there. Lastly, transportation. One of the things we've seen across the state is when cities, counties want to build affordable housing, they try and put it out as far as possible away from any of the jobs that are there. So people are commuting an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours to get to their workplace. It's time to start rethinking that, and how do we get that affordable housing closer to where jobs are so we're not clogging the roadways. I was in Salinas on Tuesday night where we were doing a preservation of an apartment complex there, and there was a long discussion about how a lot of housing has been pushed out and the traffic is increasing out there dramatically. That's a problem that's not going to age well, and we need to focus on how do we bring that housing closer to the job centers and not push it out as far as possible. And there are ways to do that. Again, it goes back to that partnership. So looking forward, I go back to where I started. Opportunity, changing the discussion, creating that dynamic where we don't have that pushback either from your constituents or from others out there saying that this is not good housing for our community. And I really look forward to seeing what comes out of this today, what comes out of this in the future, because you as counties, by even starting this discussion, are taking that next step to really build these affordable housing units and opportunity housing that the state and your local counties need. So thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Debbie Latham, Chief Deputy in the County Counsel's Office for the County of Sonoma. She started working for Sonoma County in 2006 as a land use deputy and has served as the Chief Deputy of the Litigation Practice Group since 2015. In addition to litigation oversight, her primary area of practice is labor and employment law, specifically with an emphasis on the Americans with Disabilities Act. So welcome, Debbie. Thank you.
I'm here today to talk to you about anti-camping ordinances in the wake of the City of Boise, Martin versus City of Boise federal court case. Has everybody heard of that case? Do you know what it's about? I'll try not to bore you with the details, but the real takeaway from that case is there was a challenge by 6 individuals who had been charged with violating the City of Boise's anti-camping ordinance that brought an action to try to seek damages and injunctive relief to stop enforcement of that camping ordinance. And it was really an interesting, lengthy discussion by the court that ultimately ended up holding that enforcement of the ordinance could be a violation of the 8th Amendment to the Constitution. What is the 8th Amendment? That's cruel and unusual punishment. Why is that, you ask? It's because if you criminalize the act of being homeless and you don't have a place for people to go just by virtue of the involuntary nature of them being homeless, then that could be a violation of constitutional rights. So where does that leave us as local agencies that have anti-camping ordinances? Interestingly, it did that, but it didn't do other things. So that case did not award damages against the City of Boise. There's this case called Heck v. Humphreys that talks about the way to challenge an ordinance and receive tortious damages is not because you seek a side action for the ordinance, you have to challenge the underlying violation. And so the court really said, no, we're not going to award monetary damages. But they did say injunctive relief was proper, but not in every instance. So what didn't it do is also worth noting. So injunctive relief doesn't necessarily prohibit enforcement per se of the ordinance. It's not per se unconstitutional, it's how you apply it. So in some instances, there's still going to be tools that you have for emergencies and safety hazards, where you've offered adequate shelter, and this is key. So if you've offered adequate shelter and somebody refuses it, you still may be able to enforce your ordinance. Reasonable limits at particular times during the day, perhaps, placing limits on how long somebody can be in a particular place. Other violations, so for example, assault and battery, and then I think there was some mention about environmental damage, that would be another example, or drug use. And obstruction of public rights of way. Areas not truly open to the public, like schools or fenced areas. So it's important to know what the City of Boise decision did and did not do. So that's just kind of a broad brush. So why am I talking to you about this? Sonoma County is currently involved in litigation, and because it's pending litigation, I'm not going to go too deep into the details, but I will tell you it stems from a homeless encampment that happened in our Roseland Village area. We had a need, unfortunately, to move people off of the site because, ironically, our Community Development Commission purchased the property solely for the purpose of building affordable housing. You can't build the affordable housing unless the encampment is moved, so we can build the affordable housing. So it started out as a small group of people that were there sort of with permission. It wasn't a sanctioned encampment, but it ballooned like a magnet to over 100 people and just kept growing. And our Community Development Commission partnered with Catholic Charities and other outreach agencies to really try to work with people. And I really like the example from Fresno County because that's really a lot of how we approach these. We don't try to come in and force, removal unless that's a last resort. Our community is very supportive of trying to find solutions, trying to find placements, trying to find locations and services for people, but sometimes that is a last resort. So we went through a lengthy process, ended up over Easter weekend getting a temporary restraining order request from homeless advocates who filed a lawsuit. We were successful in defending that by showing that we did actually have a pretty robust process in place through our navigation center to try to place people. But nevertheless, we're still dealing with the lawsuit because, unfortunately, more plaintiffs have come in the interim. Not everyone has been able to be placed, and the new sort of bar set by the Martin versus City of Boise case is much more difficult. So it used to be if there was a vacancy, you could use your statistics. So, okay, in our particular shelter, we have 20 beds that are open. We've offered them. That's not good enough anymore. Now you have to show individualized. I met with X person was offered a placement at this bed or this shelter or this voucher, and it was actually offered and actually potentially adequate. So that's sort of a raising of the bar. Another raising of the bar, this hasn't really been as much a problem for us, but religious organizations as your partnerships, you got to make sure that they don't unduly place impediments to placement because of somebody's religious belief, because that could result in a violation of the Establishment Clause under the First Amendment. Other challenges, working with your partners. Maybe this isn't so much as a challenge as an opportunity. I like how somebody phrased that. Working with the boundaries between city and county. Some of our property in the county is actually within the city jurisdiction, so it's actually their anti-camping ordinance. And then, of course, working with your law enforcement and your district attorney's office. We also have an elected sheriff in Sonoma County, so we don't want to unduly bind the elected sheriff. And then ADA and privacy rights. A lot of the individuals that need homeless services are also individuals with self-disclosed disabilities. We have to make sure that we are offering adequate interactive process and placement that considers potential disabilities. You'd be really surprised if you haven't actually been in the trenches or talked to people that are in the trenches at how many different types of disabilities are out there that can be difficult to you when placing somebody. One example would be somebody who has a fear of tightly enclosed spaces, doesn't want barriers. The next person would be just the opposite. They'd been victimized and attacked, and so they have PTSD and can't be in somewhere that doesn't have enclosures around their bed at a shelter. So that's just two brief examples. Storage of the property. Due process is required before you can take and move a homeless person's property. So one of the things we've been looking at is a more robust process for inventorying, cataloging, photographing, and then placing a reasonable time with reasonable notification to help people so that once they are able to find a placement, they can come get their stuff. So what does this all mean? What are some recommendations I can make? Again, we're still involved in our lawsuit, but I think a couple of things I can suggest to you. Review your anti-camping ordinance if you have one with your counsel and your sheriff's office. Consider modifying your enforcement policies so that you're compliant with the City of Boise decision. Partner with your nonprofits and beef up your placement so that you truly do have adequate shelter offered. Establish a grievance process is another thing we're looking at. Build in prior notice before you try to move people off. Insist on participation from the individuals as well. Develop more placements wherever possible. I know that's the biggest challenge here, and that's what I hear a lot of you tackling today. And keep records, keep good records. And those are just some of my suggestions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've gotten some really good insights, and also I think it's really clear that many of us in the room are facing the same issues that you have described. I also want to just go back to something that you said, James, when you were talking about affordable housing for the police people and teachers and such. Many of the partnerships that all of us have are with people in the not-for-profit organizations. Those are some of the people as well who really need affordable housing, and it's a large part of our community. So to be able to see this as a twofold mission where we're working with the community in many ways to solve the problems, but we're really conscious of the people who are solving the problems and some of the issues that they face. So thank you for that very much.
We're a border county next to Nevada. Many of our employees for Forest Service, CHP, our own county sheriffs have moved across the border. Lack of housing, the primary reason, and affordable housing. So, we heard the earlier speakers talk about school districts creating housing for their employees. How do we coordinate those efforts with all of these partner agencies to create housing opportunities within the county and for that matter to be able to house the county employees? We have the same problem. It's employee flight to another state for varying reasons, but if there was affordable housing, they would be in the community, they would be contributing to the economy of the county in which they work. And so we're having a real struggle with that, recruitment, retaining good employees for long term. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we've had a decline in school population. It's a kind of a snowball effect. So, suggestions.
You are seeing a similar dynamic go on in Nevada County, where people are going over the hill to Reno because they can't afford anything in the Tahoe region. And I think where this all starts is getting the right people in the room, especially the development community, to figure out solutions in terms of whether it's teacher housing, whether it's county employee housing, but starting that discussion and building out that institutional resource group, really from the perspective of the development side. We've also seen a big interest in the community banking side, where community banks who are within the community are trying to find ways to loan within that community for affordable housing because they want to have their jobs there. They're obviously a community bank, and they want to keep their people there and keep the community strong. So I think it's multifaceted. It's bringing in the development, it's bringing in the governmental side, and it's also bringing in the lending side as a whole and having that broader discussion as a group. It's the starting point. It's not the end point. It's the starting point. So.
Thank you.
I have a question or maybe comment for Ms. Latham. I think a lot of communities now, and I know it's particularly ours, are struggling with the increasing number of encampments. So are you saying it seems as if you don't have adequate shelter to offer, you cannot enforce non-camping in particular areas? And so that's very difficult. I'm on both sides of the fence. I advocate for homeless, of course, and then with working with the county, we do try to respond to concerns about those who are camping in not authorized areas. So how would that approach be? I'm not sure if there is a way to address it.
No, that is the challenge, and you do make yourself vulnerable to a challenge if you're not able to show documentation that you've offered adequate placement as part of your enforcement process. So I would urge you to, as I said, work with your counsel and also continue to develop placement opportunities, whether that be through vouchers or shelters or like in Sonoma County, we have a hotel that was converted to affordable housing. So those are the types of things that you can look to. We try not to use vouchers, but that is an option that costs money. So it's there's no easy solution.
And it always comes back to funding, doesn't it? You know, honestly, which is why I think your presentation was really helpful to us. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers. And just a round of applause.